Ready? Okay.
So
I will call to order this special planning and zone. Is it a special one? Special planning and zoning meeting at 6:06. In attendance tonight is Carolyn Conant and Miles Lofton, Kaya Marenfeld, and this is Jill Tatton, and I will oversee the meeting as Kaya is not feeling well. And we have Corey Shirtliff and Luke Bolchowski, pretty close, in the audience, and a member of our community, Taylor Lawrence. Is that correct? Okay. First of all, we'll be doing citizens to be heard. Any citizens to be heard?
there were no submittals or written testimony before the meeting, for the public hearing or otherwise.
All right. Well, since we have nobody, we'll move forward. All right. Approval of minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look at them?
I'll make a motion to approve the draft minutes from the January 30th, 2025 special meeting of the Moab City Planning Commission.
Anybody second?
I'll go ahead and second that.
All right. We have a motion to approve the minutes by Carolyn Conant and a second by Miles Lofton. Any discussion? Perfect. All right. Well, let's do a roll call vote. Just all in favor, say aye to approve the minutes.
Aye.
Aye. That's everybody said aye. 4-0. That work?
No, works great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. All right. We will continue to move on in our agenda to action item number 4.1. And it's consideration and possible recommendation of proposed ordinance number 2025-2, an ordinance approving the zoning map amendment for the parcel located at 198 East Center Street, Moab, Utah. From C2 commercial to residential zone to C3 central commercial zone. All right.
Very good. Thank you, Jill.
Well, I thank you.
We won't go through a full presentation tonight. This item is a re-noticed public hearing, which we'll go ahead and open the public hearing as well. So Jill, if you want to, before I get into any briefing, just announce the time in which we're opening the public hearing.
It is 6:09 that we are opening the public meeting hearing. Sorry.
Perfect. We'll probably be able to leave the hearing period open for the remainder of the discussion, and then we can close prior to a motion. So again, won't go through a great deal of review in that we spent a good portion of our last meeting reviewing this item, given it was the scheduled public hearing and action. However, there was a deficiency in the noticing standards. So this is the reposted public hearing of this item, where we'll be eligible for action at this point to make recommendation to City Council, either a positive recommendation with or without modifications, table the item if there are specific elements or outstanding information you need to help make that recommendation, or deny, or excuse me, negative recommendation. So again, with this item, we're looking at 198 East Center, zone change from C2 single household and 2 household residential zone to the C3 central commercial zone. The vicinity map that was included in the packet has profiled the proximity of the existing zoning district polygons, specific to the C3 being more central to 191 Main Street, and then having some breadth out to the east and west of that more central linear core north to south. And then also what we are currently zoned as the C2 in this area, which is more or less a designated civic zone on our future land use map, but not specific to some of our more specific zone districts. So civic was the idea C2 and C3 could both understand to be qualifying as compliant with that future land use map. One of the elements here that was for consideration is the element that the property on its own would create a non-contiguous zoning polygon. The adjacent property owners adjacent to the west and then also to the south beyond the flag lot surrounding this property have also mentioned, they've made no comment or testimony to this item, but mentioned that maybe in the future they'd be open to the idea of possibly rezoning as well. But at the moment, what we're looking at is, again, a pulled back view of zoning districts, period. We can't look at particular uses. We're not looking at particular futures. What we're looking at is basically, does this zoning district align with our future land use and general plan, as well as any potential uses that can go in that district align with the development area and characteristics of that. We went through a number of the provisions and procedures updated to the packet. We did add a matrix comparing all permitted uses within C2 versus those within the C3. Those that were bolded, you'd be able to pick up on were those that were unique to that zone, and then the ones that were not bolded on either list were those that were shared. So it was a good portion of them, obviously, that were shared, but there were some outstanding uses on both sides that were unique to that zone. To that discussion, we reviewed this extensively, but it was included in the packet and agenda summary for this item as well, were the essentially disclosure provisions for zoning map amendments, which we reviewed pretty completely at the last meeting, as well as the criteria. So if you're able to meet one of the three disclosure criteria for the zoning map, it could be eligible that you're reviewing through the additional criteria. So again, that's all listed on the process and procedures component of the agenda summary. So with that being said, I think I will conclude my briefing piece. We can, at the discretion of the commission and chair or vice chair tonight, have additional contributions or questions answered by the applicant and property owner. We can move straight to discussion, but following either one of those, we'll close the public hearing and then enter into deliberation period.
All right. Thank you, Corey.
Up to you.
So we can have the applicant come up if you'd like to hear from him further, more than beyond what he's already
I think it's more if
provided.
people have specific questions they'd like to ask the applicant that we didn't get to ask last time.
Yeah. Do you
Right.
guys have any more questions?
But I would say the biggest change is we just have the sort of the map amendment criteria in front of us now,
Mhm.
which we didn't last time, which is helpful. And then, yeah, it's really just kind of a continuation of the discussion from last time,
Okay.
but it's your call if you'd like to hear from the applicant again, or just have them there for questions. It's your. I have no opinion.
Would you like to go ahead and make sure to state your name as you
Property owner.
and the mic? Okay.
I'm
Thank you.
Property owner, I'm Taylor Lawrence.
Mhm.
So I've done a lot of homework since our last meeting. I assure you there will never be a gas station in that area. It's too small. And then there's like odor requirements in the special, it just, yeah, I just want to, there will never be a gas station. So, but what I want to do is just enhance, the future Moab off of Main Street. That's what I want to do. The property is non-compliant right now. I'd love to bring it into compliance. I talked with both of my adjacent neighbors. The ones to the west said they're totally on board. And then the ones to the south, who's also the largest private landowner on the block, said he's 100% behind me, the Baileys. So yeah, I'm just moving from a C2 to a C3. And do you guys have any questions for me after the last meeting?
Any other questions?
I heard all of that.
Okay.
Good.
Just didn't want to
Okay.
blow my nose in company here.
No, it's all good. It's good. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, discussion.
So I guess especially having the new information provided in the packet and kind of where I want to start discussion, if that's all right with you guys, is around the idea that we are really only supposed to have these zoning changes as a matter of last resort, right? That we want to work within our zones and if anything, adapt those zones to better suit what we want to do here, rather than just rezone. And if we go through some of these approval criteria or policy declaration, they ask if like the land was zoned in error, which I don't believe is the case here, or if the area has changed to such a degree that it is worthy of a rezone, which in this case, I mean, the civic buildings and the ballpark have pretty much always been there. It's been a neighborhood for a very long time. So the question is the like downtown area along Center Street there changing enough to warrant this? And I was honestly curious how my fellow commissioners felt about this.
Anything, Carol?
Yeah, I agree. When I was going through those three criteria, it was the area for which a map amendment is requested has changed or is changing to such a degree that it is in the public interest to encourage redevelopment of the area. That was the most applicable criteria to this request. And if you look at yeah, Center Street to the west of the property, that's probably been the area that has had the most change besides the kind of dispersed parking, which hasn't necessarily changed sort of the feel or the overall use of the corridor. So to me, when I was going through these options, all of the criteria were more kind of not applicable or no to kind of justify a zoning change that were, whereas the state were kind of discouraged, unless there's a really strong kind of case going through all these other criteria. But yeah, I mean, it's a hard conversation to talk about like existing change and projected change and not being able to foresee or wanting to hinder positive change for what could be another kind of mini commercial or downtown corridor, and whether the C2 or the C3 fits better with that vision for kind of broadening economic activity along Center Street and maintaining the other kind of community elements and feel of the neighborhood that we're interested in. So I'm also curious to hear other thoughts.
I also think one thing I want to kind of address and put out there too is I do think it is a slippery slope to make a zone change in order to bring into compliance items on a property that are currently out of compliance. And like the outbuilding in particular seems to be right on the property line.
It's like 2 feet off,
10 feet out,
2 feet off.
2 feet off. Yeah. So still within a setback, even if this was like residential setbacks, that outbuilding would be out of compliance. And so I kind of feel like I would rather not set a precedent of like, we'll take this big heavy handed tool that is rezoning and use it when people like, I mean, it's unfortunate. A lot of properties in this city have compliance issues and particularly setback issues. And I think as we continue to develop the city, that those issues should be addressed within the zoning that is applied rather than changing the zoning for a purpose like that. So I would be considering this zone change based on a change of use in the area and growth of the commercial area around Center Street. But I don't think it would be appropriate to consider this zone change based on bringing a property into compliance with setbacks and otherwise.
I think I apologize again, Taylor. This is the worst timing ever for me being sick. I'm so sorry. Please know that I've
Yeah.
given this tons of thought as well, despite being like not 100% right now. I think that's where I am too. I think as far as just the compelling reasons for the zone change, we do, especially with an upzone, have to take this really seriously, and I think try to stick with those. And hopefully you have those in front of you or have had those sort of consideration criteria that we have in our code. But I think that's really it. Like I think there are potentially other remedies to give you better beneficial use of your property that don't involve an upzone, particularly an upzone that is still a little island by itself. I think that's really the thing. It's kind of that balance of those factors for me, where it's an upzone. You can make use of the property, particularly with the proposed use that we know is likely to go in there with the parking exception that we granted to Wabi Sabi last meeting. You can still rent to them and they can still, use that property for the community, which is awesome. But the fact that it is sort of this little island by itself too, which is something that, we've had a lot of like discussions with and presentations from and visits from the state ombudsman, the property ombudsman, and that kind of thing is really something that we're supposed to be getting away from as far as zoning goes entirely across the state. If anything, amending our code to make it so that we don't have these little islands of a zone that are surrounded by things that aren't that same zone anymore. So I think with those sort of a bunch of those factors all together, rather than really any one thing, and like Miles said, I think it is potentially not a slippery slope, but maybe there being other ways other than what we see as sort of like the big hammer of an upzone, to make it so you can both use, rent, and then potentially sell your property in better compliance in the future, or hopefully in the near future. I know we sort of mentioned some of those last time, but that's kind of where I am, Jill.
Yes, I agree. I think that, like Miles said, I'm a little leery of changing the zone to bring it into compliance. Yeah, and, yeah, I'm a little reluctant to changing it, for those reasons, because it is mentioned several times. Hmm, this is a kind of a tough one. But, I think we're all kind of feeling the same about that. Any other discussions? What else?
I mean, just in looking over the uses on this, what's been provided by staff, that C3 could allow, that C2 does not allow. I'm trying to like go through each one individually and determine like whether or not that's something we want the possibility of existing in this space. Rather than like, I mean, there are ones, and you're correct, like there are, I looked into it as well, and there are a variety of reasons why it would be difficult for a gas station to move into or be almost completely impossible. It's sometimes weird workarounds happen, but for the most part, it seems like that's not a possibility. So my, looking over these, it's like things that we could either want in that space, and would be a good reason to give it the upzone to allow it the potential to have something like this. And while there are certain things that I think in a way could be beneficial, I'm not seeing anything that would require a C3 zoning that I think would be like really something we'd want to encourage in that space. I mean, I'm seeing auto parts, and auto body shops. I'm seeing drive-through windows, parking lots, maybe in terms of increased density dwellings above commercial space could be one that I think out of all the things in C3 that we wouldn't be able to have in C2, I think that's, maybe something we could be interested in having in that space. But otherwise, there are a lot of allowances in C2 for a lot of the things kind of discussed, like coffee shops and small retail and in this particular case, secondhand retail falls well within C2, and the C2 zoning would not prevent the potential tenant from using that space, especially with our parking or our decision on parking last time.
I think importantly on that, so I actually kind of where I'm coming from is uses and allowed uses aside, but if you're bringing that up, I think it's important to point out that in the C3, you're not actually allowed to have ground floor dwellings. You can have ground floor dwellings in the C2. So by going to C3, that would actually be, I think, significantly limiting potential for those kind
Yeah.
of things, which I think it potentially is a downside, particularly in that area where you kind of are on that cusp between that sort of civic and the residential right now. Do I think that's something that should stay that way in our code? No. I've been on record saying that before. I don't think we should limit housing anywhere, frankly, in the city. And I do think that's something that could be changed in the future, but you could actually have a wider array of housing types in the C2 than you can in the C3. So that I think is one thing where the C2 does have a distinct advantage, not only for just the community and our needs and the sort of character of the area, but excuse me, but for your potential uses of the property or for a potential buyer or tenant in the future too.
So I went through the general plan, 70 pages.
Oh yeah, I'm impressed,
But,
dude.
So I think part of the general plan is like, yeah, promote appropriate commercial development while maintaining quality of life for residences or for the residents. And you should consider zone change and adjustment that balances property rights and community benefits. But what I want to touch on is that I want to encourage like mixed use development, just like in the general plan that integrates retail, general commercial, residential uses. So I want that mixed use with the residential use. Like in the C2, because of the setbacks, I can't, there's nothing more to be done. So if there's a C3, you could have something like 98 Center, the next block over with apartments on the top. And it's someone could walk to it, grab a coffee, grab a bagel, get a used book, and then keep walking. So we have that pedestrian friendly parking in place. That's new. Yeah, I actually have another meeting tomorrow with a organic market here in town. They can't use the property if it's in the C2 zone, but if it's in the C3 zone, they can. And that they have a deli. I mean, they have, yeah, I think it'd be awesome for the community. Both neighbors are on board. But yeah, that's a potential. Yeah, like I think it could be a potential for the benefit of the whole community having them there, but they can't be there in the C2 zone because I believe C2 has 1,500 square foot retail, or is it 3,500 square foot retail?
I believe it's 1,500.
Yeah, and so they need like 6,000. And then like right now I'm off this use, but like I just kind of wanted that mixed use potential where you could have your coffee shop, your yoga studio, then have your apartments on top. And then everybody works and lives in the same place. And so I don't know if I approached this the wrong way. Should I have like had the organic market in mind when I came for the zone change, or I was hoping to see the temperature of the zone change, and then yeah, I'm glad you guys are so thorough, but like I'm just trying to the highest and best use of the property I think would be multi mixed use, and with that 25-foot setback, it's really hard to kind of change what I have going on right now, which is the empty office building. Or can we integrate like cafes and coffee shop, yoga studios, anything that you'd see in like a downtown a commercial center.
So, Corey, I have 2 questions for you. One, what are the setbacks for C3?
They can be 0 lot line.
Okay.
obviously that requires separation mitigation for the structure itself, but as far as setback goes, I believe it's 0 lot line or
Can be right up on the lot line.
360,
Yep.
front, side, and rear.
Okay, that makes sense. And obviously the 25-foot setback is one of the bigger
It's
issues.
the biggest setback in
You
all
have
the zones, yeah.
The C3 zone or C2 zoning in general. That like
Yeah.
there are many things that could fit in there. And yes, like this particular grocer would need more space than C2 would allow, but it's that 25-foot setback that's killing you. I guess my question is to staff, how could that be addressed separately from a zoning change?
Thank you. I think I'll address 2 points. One, just a quick clarification circling back, is I think within the C2, mixed use is a viable option. So you could have a medley of including residential mixed into commercial. In the C3, it is restricted or regulated as to how that might happen, almost more so than other zones. So the C2 is actually, it's a little bit more open because it's not specifically regulated or restricted. But getting down to development standards, like we talked about, there's 2 pieces of this. One are some of the underlying zone standards, and then are use specific standards. So even if you were C2, C3, doesn't matter, that particular use required you to have a 15-foot setback buffer with additional blah, blah, blah. It could restrict that development envelope regardless of your zoning. So you have to approach that from multiple fronts as to particular uses, what's most appropriate for that use that it is essential that has those use parameters. And then if a property cannot support that, it's indicative that that use can't be supported in that location because those use parameters should only be in place if it's essential to that use being able to operate. And the other is broad zone requirements. And if I might, I was going to pull this up anyway, so it's kind of a nice transition here really quick. This is our Google Earth GIS mapping system with some of our layers shown. So all the yellow is indications of property boundary parcel lines. The colored polygons are the zoning districts, and then obviously roadways. So what we're over here. This is, if you can see my little cursor floating around here, that's the current property we're looking at. What I'm going to get at here, I think, which is the heart, maybe the question Miles is getting at, is you can see from C2, just as an example, how scattered some of those C2 zone districts are throughout the community. It is a traditional zoning tool that you're using to maybe replicate areas that are similar, but I think it's clear in our area that this C2 does not look a whole lot like this C2 area. So if you can see my little cursor, I'm over on the east side where we're located, kind of downtown central town site core. It's over where the hospital is. Now, while some of those uses might make some sense in those areas, the underlying zone district, how could it possibly contemplate for 5-acre parcels or greater while we're also looking at parcels that are barely 5,000 square feet, just under 6,000? You can't have the same setbacks there. It doesn't make sense. So this is something we've been identifying. The commission had a pretty extensive discussion about that, in particular to industrial zones. We have an industrial zone right here next to the conservation area. And then kind of individual parcel, but then a whole nother district that have totally different characteristics. And therefore the standards, even the use standards within some of that zone didn't make any sense. That was actually rectified during that text amendment. So this leads to my kind of closing point is it's maybe that the zone itself needs C2. Maybe it's accurately attributed for this area as civic. Maybe C2 is meant to be representative of that. Maybe the text of that zone needs to amend to make infill, adaptive refill, or redevelopment a better usable option specific to the characteristics of this area. And something we're going to be looking at in the future is this might need to be, for lack of a better term, C2 zone 1, and this is C2 zone B or C or C, whatever.
Yeah.
Is that breaking these very different character areas into different districts? That way they can have setbacks that make sense or development standards that make sense. These are all longer term options, but to an applicant, we saw this with the industrial zone. I think we're also contemplating a zone change, which we just from a staff perspective, said you're going to be kind of hard pressed to make that case. They transitioned to a text amendment. They were successful with that for that particular use that they're going for. It's not quite the same thing we're looking at here. Is we are looking at a zone based situation, not a use situation. But I think that's one of the options. So to me, when I'm looking at this and what my understanding from discussions with administration and, you know, how that's being discussed, because the council's well aware of this item coming to them. They're giving it a lot of thought. It's possible they may even need more time because they're going to want to hear this meeting tonight, give them enough time. So it's possible they could even need to take more time to make a decision. But is that where I think we put it kind of best during the last meeting, is it's unfortunate that this burden has fallen to the property owner to have to be like, I'm
Totally.
stuck.
Right.
We should not have let our community fall into a place where the
Yep.
property owners are feeling so stuck or so limited. So, I mean, obviously, we're going to try to help them guide what tools they can have to try to fix that, but it's also at the restriction of what we can get through on an organized front, which is the city reevaluating their districts, reevaluating their zoning standards. So it's a tough, that's the push and pull we talked about last time, which I think is most accurate, is, you know, our zones, our code says you need to wait. This needs to be a consolidated, organized effort. But we're also at this, like, we're trying to move people along because, you know, 5 years to do a total zoning title update and total district overhaul, that's nothing. That makes total sense, 5 years. But for a property owner, that's a whole lifespan of maybe a whole business opportunity or how to redevelop. So balancing those things is difficult. That's why I think the question will ultimately fall to the council will be. But they are looking to the commission to make some guidance on what is weeding through all of this information. They're, I think, going to take it pretty, take it into great consideration what your recommendation will be. But I think they're looking at the same criteria, the same list as you guys, which, as we've talked about, it's kind of boils down to just, well, obviously some discretion, but kind of the way the code's structured. So that was a long-winded answer. I think I hit it at least in 1 or 2 points, but is there anything you'd like to hear beyond that, to the point of your question?
No, that answered my question. The text amendment could be pursued to address the massive setbacks.
Mhm.
And that,
Or something like I sort of spitballed last time, where there are properties within specific zones that are almost given a pass until there's some sort of major, like, deconstructing, reconstructing, redevelopment. That would be something that we could feasibly write into our code, understanding that this is something that does occur other places in the city, and that it is in the best interest of the town to have the zones stay what they are as contemplated for the larger scale master plan as far as what folks want, but then also understanding that things like specific setback requirements weren't all made at the same time, and they were made after 75% of the buildings in some of those zones were already done and dusted. So gosh, I'm so sorry.
You're doing great.
Trying to you know, make basically have allowances for that, where I know that's something that, you know, it's not the cleanest, but I think it's almost the cleanest, because it does understand that we're going for a holistic vision, but there are different properties in different zones, but we also want to apply fair criteria to each and not have, this is like pie in the sky, but not have every property owner in the C2 that has some sort of compliance issue with what the code is today coming and seeking an upzone, because that's something that we granted to one property owner. And that's just kind of the situation that we're in, unfortunately. And then just the fact that city council is the more discretionary body at the end of the day, and we really are the administrative, here's what we think according to the code folks, who are not elected to make those sort of gut calls in the same way that the council is, which is kind of why I think always tend to err on the side of here's what it is right now, even if it's kind of screwy, it's our responsibility to follow it. And that's kind of where I'm at with what the criteria we're supposed to be considering are today. At least that's where I'm coming from. for listening to me suffer through this right now.
Any more discussion? Thoughts?
And this is on council's agenda tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay.
I was unaware I was on the agenda until a couple days ago.
For tomorrow.
Yeah, I actually have a meeting tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, I mean, so that being, so two points to kind of plug here real
Yeah,
quick is, given the council's pretty interested in this item, we've heard back from them. A lot of the questions we're getting is, what were the other possible solutions that we explored? I think like Taylor said, we've been talking about this for years. Not a lot has changed in the manner of discussion because the code really hasn't evolved all that much, but I think this is one of the first truly formal actions towards remedy. So you got to start somewhere, but I think we've contemplated some, but I think the council's looking to like what this is, I think was kind of attributed as this is a big hammer tool and maybe a surgical tool could do a better job. I think that's kind of a sense that I'm starting to get. We won't know until they obviously meet and have that discussion. But to that point, is they're also feeling like this was all pretty quick. I think we wanted to get to this meeting so that we had the eligibility for tomorrow's meeting, given the noticing deficiency. It would have been on tomorrow's meeting had that or not been a noticing deficiency. So that was the attempt for this Monday meeting. But it's very possible like tomorrow they're going to want to review it, but they'll probably going to want some extra time. So it could be okay that we can work that out to have it go to the second meeting in February. But anyway, yeah, I thought I had another point, but those were the two that I think were in response to Taylor. Okay, if
Anything
there's
else?
no more discussion, we can close the public hearing and then enter into deliberation and
Okay,
possible motions.
we're ready? Okay, we're going to close the public meeting at 6:43.
Hearing.
What? Hearing?
Hearing, yep.
Sorry.
Not quite the
Public
meeting yet.
hearing at 6:43. And, all right,
Thank you. If we need to, we can go through options again for the commission, but we could entertain a motion
Mhm.
and then following that motion, enter into, if it receives a second, a further deliberation period, and then we can call for a motion. So don't feel stuck in being able to communicate this through, but we can, openly discuss now or have a specific deliberation after a motion.
Doing great,
Anybody?
Jill.
What?
Said you're doing great.
Oh, thanks. So are you.
See what my voice gives
You're
us.
still sitting. Anybody? There's a couple of options there. Miles. Marilyn.
If I'm not running the meeting, I can take one for the team here.
Okay,
Oh, one last quick question. Corey, do you have I know we kind of touched on it last time, but I feel like it comes up so often that we say, we'll have the opportunity to address these things in a more kind of systemic and sustainable way when we make our code updates. And do you have any updates about the timeline for the code overhaul process?
As it might be relevant, we are currently splitting this. So might as well just go over some of the future agenda stuff now. We've made an offer to a associate planner who's accepted. They'll be starting in 2 weeks, which additionally through kind of chain is freeing up my flexibility to actually engage with our attorney. So I've met with our attorney twice. We are reviewing the first module from zoning title update. So we're going to be scheduling moving forward on that. So there will be tracked progress from here on out. We're meeting every week to review module sections. That being said, as a part of that, in this first module that we're looking at is assessment of our zoning district base. It's going to come with maybe what could be called accurate renaming of existing districts, but it also is contemplating consolidations of districts or some, not moving boundaries necessarily, but hey, these two districts are really close or the same thing, let's consolidate them. So it's starting to dabble into some of these features that we're already talking about. The question for us becomes how much of this is an error or discrepancy update, and or is it us actually advancing and evolving not just our municipal land use code, but also the zoning districts themselves. So it's a kind of a slippery slope how, because they're all obviously interlocked. So we're trying to find that place. I think there's a lot of incentive to try to just do it and do it right and go really start. We've been wanting this forever, but we have a certain budgetary restriction, also kind of authorization restriction that we're trying to figure that out. So it is all kind of relevant in that I'd really like to handle this all while the iron's hot, so to speak. If we find that we're unable to do that, it's possible that following our downtown master plan, we'll begin engaging in some maybe general plan updates, or how we construct this as a second version of the zoning title update that is more proactive versus reactive to what the existing code discrepancies are, is actually changing the code. But it's hard to tell at this point. So since we've just gotten started, I think the attorneys are sensing what I'm feeling from this module, which is if we're opening all these things up because we have to, we might as well just, it's really tempting to just go and fix it all. But again, we're kind of getting checked into keeping it a little bit more discrepancy based. So hard to answer that question perfectly accurate, but there's a lot of movement happening. But my guess is at best bet we'll not have something for public hearing for likely until late fall. That would be my guess before we have something really published, ready to go for you guys. That's still, within the year, I'd like to think.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Okay, I will, since I'm not running the meeting, I'll make a motion for everybody here. I move that the City of Moab Planning Commission forward a negative recommendation to the City Council on ordinance number 2025-02 to amend the zoning map for the parcel located at 198 East Center Street, Moab, Utah, 84532. This is parcel number 010B130016, from C2 Commercial Residential Zone to C3 Central Commercial Zone.
All right, we have the motion from Kaya Marenfeld, and a negative, do I say negative motion? A negative motion. Does anybody want to second that?
I'll second that.
And we have a second by Miles Lofton. Any further discussion?
This one's tough.
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Taylor. I wish it was super cut and dry and easy, but trying to just kind of go with what our requirements are. And yeah, I know that doesn't make things easier for you, and I think you've tried really hard to get this through, and I'm sorry. And ultimately, it's still up to City Council, who I wouldn't, like Corey said, I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted more time with it. They kind of think about all those eventualities. I know maybe dragging it on longer isn't something that you're super excited about, but there's definitely still that possibility. I'm just trying to keep an eye on kind of what's in front of us and what our job is, unfortunately, is that sort of less discretionary body.
I think that kind of sums up how I feel about it, in the sense that unfortunately, yeah, from our kind of administrative perspective, this seems most appropriate. And though I appreciate what you're trying to do here, essentially, it's like, I'm not an elected official, so it's my job to kind of look at what criteria you're supposed to meet to be able to do what you're trying to do. And I don't feel that this meets those criteria enough to warrant an upzone.
Any further discussion? Okay, should we all do a vote?
And we can just do a
Unanimous
vote.
call vote? All right,
We don't have to not Not a roll call vote,
Okay,
just all in
just that.
favor.
All in favor?
Hi.
Say aye. Any opposed? That passes 4-0. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
I know it
A
seems weird
negative
to say a
recommendation to the
negative
council.
recommendation.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Taylor, for all of your hard work on that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks for having me. Can I just mention a couple things? Or is it too late?
That's up to the chair.
Oi. Quickly.
Yeah, okay, so what would give this more weight to warrant a zone change? Would it be the neighbor joining on with me? Or would it be like how Wabi came in, they're like, this is what we're exactly gonna do with the parcel and present it to you that way? So like either like a business that's like an organic market where they come and be like, this is our vision for the parcel. Would you be interested in a zone change, or would it have to be the
I
neighbors
think
joining
it's
on?
mostly because it really just doesn't meet the policy that we're looking at and the reasons to upzone it. And like, was it done in error? Was this, I think there's a bigger picture here than just somebody wanting to change the zone to meet certain criteria.
Okay,
There's a much larger picture. So I think that's where we're all feeling, is that this is something that just couldn't be fixed.
I
in
think
this
it's
process.
ultimately up to city council, but
Mhm.
but kind of what Jill said, I don't think it's whatever the particular use is. That wasn't for me determinative. It wasn't like, oh, I don't want there to be X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But I think it's more, if there's the shifting kind of character of the area where you could see maybe your adjacent property owners
Mhm.
to the west, there, the Quinn Star building, if that was to sort of come as a package and then connect
Yeah.
to the C3, just my sort of gut check is that that's probably the best shot.
Mhm.
Right now, that Corey will have a better pulse on that, and that's definitely a question that you can ask city council tomorrow too.
Mhm.
I
Or via email or after the fact if
Yeah.
they table it. We can't have Luke speak, but he's nodding and taking good notes behind you to make sure.
Yeah.
I agree that it being an island of zoning,
Mhm.
part of that
Yeah.
consideration, because that is not something we are trying to encourage.
Yeah,
And I think, yeah, anything you can do to, that change of character was kind of the one that I was deliberating the most. The rest, I don't think, like it was not zoned in error, and I don't think there's necessarily a need for the upzone in the area, so to speak. Or at least I think that one comes with the change in character. So if there's more of an understanding that we want more business and less residential in that area, and that is the direction the city is moving with that area around the ballpark, then that would be a different consideration for me. But as essentially, well, it's unfortunate that your neighbors are on board, but not part of this proposal, and not,
Mhm.
it creates that island, and it kind of doesn't lend as much weight to there being a change of character in the area.
Yeah. And those are questions I think like at the city meeting.
I
That would
think
be
city
better.
council can.
City council meeting. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks, Tam.
All right. Okay. On to future agenda items.
Thank you. Yes, we have a meeting this Thursday. Appreciate the hope we're all healthy and safe to attend. This Thursday will be not a public hearing, but a parking special exception request. So rather than fee in lieu, it is a special exception request based off of scope of operations of the business. It's for Bonjour on Main, a new business that'll be a satellite or auxiliary extension of Bonjour in the Dewey's Plaza.
Mhm.
Kind of grab and go situation. So the applicants will talk a little bit more about why this adaptive infill is, warranted, that just because the parking calculation changed, nothing's really changing as far as their use of the property.
Is that going in like where Tumbleweed was around there?
Foremoon.
A Foreman, yep,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
that same little block.
Very, the buildings 598 square feet.
Yeah.
It's very, very small
Mhm.
parcel, and then the building itself is even smaller. So anyway, yeah, they just were able to, through this change of use, tick over to one additional parking space, but it's Main Street sandwiched between a lot of folks in an alleyway that's inaccessible. So not a lot of options for parking there, but we'll talk a little bit more about the details of that and what the options are. That was tentatively slated as a public hearing, so it is not that. We're not going the payment fee route up front. Lions Back Phase 2 final MPD has been pushed. They weren't quite ready with final materials, but it's very likely we'll see them in the second meeting of February. I don't anticipate we'll have any more special meetings through the month of February, but our regular meeting, the second half, will likely have a couple of items. I think that's really all I have. I did mention earlier, we have a new associate planner starting not this coming Monday, but the next, which will be very, very exciting. I think that's all we have from staff and future agenda items.
Okay. Sounds great. Okay,
Take us out of here.
I'm going to adjourn this planning commission meeting at 6:57. All right,
Thanks, everybody.
thank you.
So much for the extra
Thanks,
effort.
everybody.
You're getting your,
Work.
You should go home and.
Stipends.
I know, I know, it's so silly.
Oh,
No, but I wanted, this was important. I wanted to be here.
Let's